The pills rattled in their bottles like teeth in a skull. 3 for blood pressure, 2 for cholesterol, 1 for the heart that was giving out on me, just like everything else. I lined them up on the workbench next to my coffee, black and bitter as regret. The garage smelled of motor oil and rust, familiar ghosts that had kept me company for longer than I cared to count. Dawn crept through the bay door's pale October light that did nothing to warm the concrete floor beneath my boots. The Harley shovelhead sat half-assembled on the lift, a 1975 model I'd been restoring for 3 years. Or pretending to restore. Some projects you start knowing you'll never finish, but you keep at them anyway because the working matters more than the completion. I swallowed the pills, dry felt them scrape down my throat. 62 years old and my body was a catalog of failures. The left knee that locked up in cold weather from shrapnel in Beirut '83. The ribs that never healed right after a cage fight in Reno '89. The scar tissue across my knuckles from too many fights to remember. And the heart, the goddamn heart, ticking down like a clock running out of wind. The cardiologist had been blunt 6 months ago, sitting across from me in that sterile office with his charts and his pity. 2 years, maybe 3 if I was lucky. Maybe less if I kept living the way I'd been living. Which was to say, alone on 40 acres of nothing, fixing bikes I'd never ride, avoiding phone calls from numbers I didn't recognize. The photo on my workbench was older than the pills, older than the aches. Daniel Bennett in his marine dress blues, 1976, fresh-faced and stupid with optimism before Lebanon, and the club taught him what the world really was. My older brother by 4 years, which had felt like a lifetime when we were kids. He'd enlisted first, came back different, then convinced me to sign up because brothers watched each other 6. That's what he'd said. Brothers watch each other 6. I picked up the photo, studied Danny's face like I could find answers there. 20 years since he died, and I still woke up expecting to see his truck in the driveway. Guilt's funny that way. It don't fade. Just gets quieter, settles into your bones like arthritis. A dull ache you learn to live with until you forget what it felt like to be without it. The phone on the wall rang sharp and unwelcome. I ignored it. Nothing good ever came from answering phones at 6 in the morning. The machine picked up after 4 rings, my own voice telling whoever it was to leave a message or don't, I didn't care either way. The beep. Then a voice I hadn't heard in 15 years but recognized immediately the way you recognize the sound of a gun being cocked. Marcus Cole Bennett. We know where she is. Victor Kane's voice hadn't changed. Still carried that mix of gravel and silk, the tone of a man who'd learned to give orders in barracks and never stopped. The message ended with a click. No elaboration needed. Victor wasn't the kind of man who wasted words. I played it back twice, standing there in the cold garage with my coffee going cold and my heart doing things the pills were supposed to prevent. We know where she is. Only one she Victor would bother threatening me with. Emma Carter, 25 years old. Daniel's daughter, my niece. The girl I'd stayed away from for 2 decades because that was the deal I'd made with Rachel. Keep Emma safe by staying gone. But if Victor was calling, the deal was broken. I found myself at the gun safe before I'd consciously decided to move muscle memory from a life I'd tried to leave behind. The combination spun under my fingers 3 numbers I'd never forget because they were Daniel's birthday. Inside a Colt 45 from the service older than Emma. A Glock 19 from my club days. A hunting rifle. A sawed-off shotgun I'd taken off a man in Bakersfield who didn't need it anymore. I took the Glock, checked the magazine, racked the slide. The weight of it in my hand felt wrong and right at the same time, like picking up a hammer you'd sworn never to swing again. My hands shook slightly, not from fear, but from the tremor that had started 6 months ago. Another gift from the dying heart. The old club phone tree was in a notebook buried under maintenance manuals, numbers written in pencil that had faded, but not disappeared. I found Thomas Kowalski called Wrench for the 3 tours he'd done fixing equipment in Da Nang before joining the club in '76. His number rang 6 times before he picked up. Jesus, Cole. After all these years, I need eyes on someone. Emma Carter, Daniel's kid. She working at the daily grind on Burnside silence on the line. The kind that means a man's deciding whether to get involved in something that'll probably end badly. Then Wrench's heavy sigh. She is. But Cole, there's been asking around. Hell's Angels, Victor's crew, they've been watching her for weeks. My chest tightened, not the heart attack kind, but close enough. How many 2 that I've seen? Bull and that new kid, Tick. They're not subtle about it. I thanked him, hung up, stared at the photo of Daniel until his face blurred. 25 years Emma had lived without knowing her father was anything other than a good man who died in a car accident. Rachel had built that lie, carefully brick by brick, a wall between her daughter and the truth. And I'd honored it, stayed on my side of that wall, watched from a distance as Emma grew up safe and ignorant. But safe was an illusion, and ignorance only protected you until someone decided it shouldn't. The go bag was already packed, had been for years. Fake ID 5,000 in cash, burner phones, a change of clothes. Habits from the life, the kind you never really shake. I strapped the ankle holster with the backup piece, a snub-nosed .38 that dug into my calf, but disappeared under jeans. The leather jacket came off the hook by the door club, patches torn off years ago, but the leather still scarred with their ghosts. I looked at Daniel's photo one more time before leaving. I failed you once, brother. Not again. The drive to Portland took 40 minutes, my '89 Ford F-150 eating highway like it had a grudge. The truck was older than most marriages, patched and repatched, but the engine ran clean because I'd built it myself. Control what you can control, let the rest go. That was the philosophy that kept you alive when you couldn't trust anyone else's work. The city woke up around me as I crossed the Willamette coffee shops and early commuters, and the smell of rain that hadn't fallen yet. Portland in October, damp and gray, the kind of weather that settled into your joints and reminded you that winter was coming, whether you were ready or not. The daily grind sat on a corner in Burnside, one of those places that tried too hard to look authentic, with its exposed brick and reclaimed wood. I parked across the street, 3 spaces down, angle that gave me clean sight lines to the entrance and the alley behind. The black sedan Victor's boys would be using was easy to spot, circling the block every 20 minutes like clockwork. Amateurs. Or maybe they wanted to be seen, wanted Emma to feel the pressure. Through the cafe window, I could see her moving behind the counter with the efficiency of someone who'd been pulling espresso shots long enough to do it without thinking. Dark hair pulled back, Daniel's eyes, his cheekbones, his way of tilting her head when she concentrated. 25 years old, and she looked exactly like her father had at that age before the service, before the club, before everything went wrong. My chest hurt watching her, the kind of hurt that had nothing to do with a dying heart and everything to do with the weight of years and distance and choices made for reasons that seemed solid at the time, but looked like cowardice in the morning light. The sedan made another pass. Bull in the driver's seat, thick neck and dead eyes, an enforcer who enjoyed the work too much. Tick riding shotgun, younger, eager, the kind of prospect who'd do anything to prove himself. They were watching Emma the way wolves watch prey, patient and certain. I stayed in the truck drinking coffee from a thermos that had gone cold. Watching, waiting. The cafe closed at 10. Emma would walk home 7 blocks through streets that got darker and emptier the farther you got from the main drag. Rachel had always been paranoid about Emma walking alone at night, and for once, Rachel's paranoia was justified. The hours crawled. I took my evening pills, felt the tremor in my hands get worse as the day wore on. Stress, the doctor had said. Avoid stress, like telling the ocean to avoid being wet. 10:45, the lights in the cafe went dark. Emma emerged with another girl, blonde, probably a coworker. They talked on the sidewalk, the blonde gesturing toward a car parked at the curb. Emma shook her head, smiled, waved goodbye. The blonde drove off and Emma started walking, hands in her jacket pockets, breath fogging in the October cold. The black sedan pulled out from its spot 2 blocks down. I gave them half a block head start, then followed on foot. Old skills coming back, staying in shadows, using parked cars for cover, moving quiet despite the bad knee. The sedan crawled along, matching Emma's pace, and I could see Bull pointing, saying something to Tick. They were planning their approach, picking their moment. Emma turned onto Mason Street, darker now. The streetlights creating pools of yellow that left too much shadow between them. Her pace quickened slightly, some instinct telling her something was wrong, even if she couldn't name it. Women develop that instinct, the awareness of being watched, the prickle on the back of the neck that meant danger was close. The sedan accelerated past her, screeched to a stop 30 feet ahead. Both doors open. Bull and Tick got out, moving to intercept her from the front, while I was still half a block behind. I broke into a run, or what passed for running with a bad knee and a worse heart. Emma saw them, stopped her hand, going to her purse for pepper spray, or keys, or whatever small defense she'd armed herself with. Bull grinned, spreading his arms wide like he was greeting an old friend. I put myself between them and her, stepping into the streetlight, letting them see me clearly. Emma gasped, tried to back away, but I kept my voice low and steady, the tone I'd used to calm scared Marines in firefights. You're in danger. Pretend I'm your dad. Emma's eyes went wide, fear and confusion fighting for dominance on her face. She saw what everyone saw when they looked at me. A big man, gone gray, leather jacket, scars the kind of rough trade you cross the street to avoid. But she didn't run. Something in her recognized something in me, even if she couldn't name it. Just walk with me. Act natural. She hesitated for one heartbeat, two, then fell into step beside me. Her shoulder barely reached mine, and I could feel her trembling through the air between us. I positioned myself on the street side, putting my body between her and any threat that might come from the road. Old habits from the life protecting what mattered. They call me Jax in the old days. Just keep walking and smile if anyone looks our way like we're having a normal conversation. Why should I trust you? Because right now I'm the only one who knows what's coming. The roar of the sedan's engine killed whatever she was about to say next. It came up fast behind us, tires squealing, then shot past to stop directly in our path. Bull and Tick emerged like bad dreams blocking the sidewalk. Bull was 6'4" and 250, most of it muscle, and he moved with the confidence of a man who'd won more fights than he'd lost. Tick was smaller, but wired the kind of nervous energy that made him dangerous because he had something to prove. Well, well, look who it is. Marcus Cole Bennett. Thought you were dead. Not yet, though I've been working on it. The joke fell flat, which was fine. I wasn't trying to be funny. I was buying time calculating angles, assessing whether Emma could run if things went bad. Bull took a step closer, eyes flicking between me and Emma, doing his own calculations. Didn't expect to see you in this neighborhood, Jax. Just taking my daughter home. You know how it is. Can't be too careful these days. The lie rolled out smooth because I'd been lying for so long, I'd almost forgotten what truth felt like. Bull studied Emma, then me, looking for resemblance, finding enough to make him doubt. Emma played along, pressing closer to my side like she'd done it 1,000 times. That the Carter girl, that's my daughter. We got a problem. Bull's hand twitched toward his jacket, and I knew he had a piece there, probably a 9mm, and I knew he was young enough and dumb enough to pull it in the middle of a city street. I didn't move my own hand toward the Glock, just held his gaze, let him see that I wasn't afraid and I wasn't backing down. And if this went the way he was thinking it would go, at least one of us wasn't walking away. Victor wants a word with you. Tell him I'm not hard to find, but he leaves her alone. The standoff stretched silence heavy between us. Tick shifted his weight, eager for action, but Bull was older, smarter, and knew that sometimes walking away was the better play. After what felt like an hour but was probably 30 seconds, Bull backed up, jerked his head at Tick. Another time, old man. They got back in the sedan, engine growling as they pulled away. Emma sagged against me, breath coming fast, and I realized I'd put my arm around her shoulders without thinking, the gesture automatic, protective. What the hell was that? That was your past catching up. We need to talk. The diner was 3 blocks away, Pete's Roadhouse, a place that had been serving coffee and pie since before I was born. I guided Emma there through back streets, staying away from main roads, checking over my shoulder every 30 seconds. The tremor in my hands had gotten worse, and I shoved them in my pockets so Emma wouldn't see. Pete's was nearly empty at 11 p.m., just an old man at the counter reading a paper and a waitress who looked like she'd been working there since Eisenhower. We took the back booth, me facing the door, because I always faced the door, Emma across from me, looking shell-shocked and angry and scared in equal measure. The waitress came over, poured coffee without asking if we wanted any, and left menus we wouldn't read. I ordered pie apple because Daniel had always ordered apple pie, and some rituals you kept even when the person you kept them for was 20 years dead. Who are you, really? Someone who knew your father. My father died in a car accident when I was 5. Your father died because of me. The words hung between us, heavy and true. Emma's hands wrapped around her coffee mug like she needed the heat knuckles white with pressure. She studied my face, and I let her, figuring she deserved to see what 2 decades of guilt looked like up close. Those men called you Marcus Cole Bennett, but you said your name was Jax. Jax is what the club called me. Road name, short for Jackson, my middle name. Cole is my real name. Marcus Cole Bennett, your uncle. Emma's coffee cup stopped halfway to her lips. She set it down carefully like sudden movements might shatter something. My uncle. Mom never mentioned you. Rachel was protecting you. Way she knew how. The pie came and I ate it mechanically, tasting nothing. Emma didn't touch her coffee, just stared at me like I was a puzzle she couldn't solve. She had Daniel's intensity, that way of looking at you like she could see straight through to whatever you were hiding. Tell me everything. About my father, about why they're after me. So I told her, not everything, not yet, but enough. Your father and I were Hell's Angels back in the day. He went by the road name Tommy in the club. That's what everyone called him. Club tradition keeps real identities protected. Daniel became Tommy, Marcus became Jax. We all had our names. Why did he need a fake name? Because the life we lived, you didn't want people knowing who you really were. Made it harder for the law, harder for enemies, harder for the past to catch up. Your dad, he was rising in the club, respected. But then he met your mom and everything changed. I told her about the brotherhood and loyalty and the kind of debts that don't get forgiven. About Daniel trying to leave, trying to build a normal life with Rachel and baby Emma. About the men who thought leaving was betrayal, and betrayal only had one punishment. I didn't tell her how he died. That was a story for another time, if there ever was a good time for stories about your father bleeding out in an abandoned warehouse, while I lay unconscious 10 feet away. Emma processed it all with the kind of calm that comes from shock, when things are so far outside your understanding that your brain just stops trying to make sense of them. The diner felt too bright, too normal. The old man at the counter turning newspaper pages while we talked about murder and motorcycle gangs and debts written in blood. I need to go home. I'll drive you. I can walk. You can't. Not anymore. Not now that they know you know. We drove in silence, Emma giving directions in a monotone. Her apartment was in a decent neighborhood, the kind Rachel would have chosen, safe and boring, and far from anything that looked like the life Emma's father had actually lived. I parked at the curb and engine idling, and Emma sat there with her hand on the door handle, but not opening it. Thank you. For tonight. Don't thank me yet. This isn't over. She got out, walked to her building, and I watched until she was inside with the door locked behind her. Then I sat in my truck, taking pills I'd forgotten to take earlier, feeling my heart hammer against my ribs like it was trying to break free. My phone buzzed. Wrench's number. Victor's putting the word out. He wants you. Says to bring the girl for a meeting. I hung up, drove home through empty streets, and found myself back in the garage at 3 a.m., staring at the unfinished Harley and Daniel's photo and the phone that would ring again because Victor always followed through on his threats. Rachel's house was a mistake, showing up at dawn after a sleepless night, but mistakes were all I had left. The door opened before I could knock, Rachel standing there in her robe with eyes that said she already knew why I was here. You promised. You promised to stay away, Victor Kane called. They know about her. Rachel's face went from anger to fear, in half a second, all the color draining out like someone had opened a tap. She looked older than 52, lines around her eyes that came from 2 decades of looking over her shoulder. We stood on her porch, autumn wind cutting through my jacket, and I watched her cycle through emotions I knew too well. Denial, bargaining, acceptance. Then we run. Like before. You've been running 20 years. Hasn't worked. It kept her alive. Barely. They found her, Rachel. Running's over. I don't want your help. You're the reason Danny's dead. The words hit exactly where she aimed them, center mass, the kind of shot that dropped you where you stood. I took it, absorbed it, because she wasn't wrong and we both knew it. I know. But I'm all you've got. Rachel's face crumpled, the tough exterior she'd maintained for 2 decades finally cracking. She cried there on her porch, and I stood there like a useless piece of furniture, hands in my pockets, because I'd lost the right to comfort her a long time ago. I can't lose her too. You won't. I give you my word. Your word. Like the word you gave Danny, I had no answer for that. We both knew what my word was worth. Rachel wiped her eyes, pulled herself together with visible effort, and looked at me with something that might have been pity, or might have been contempt, or might have been both. Stay away from her, Cole. Stay away from all of it. We'll handle this ourselves. She closed the door and I stood there listening to locks turning, deadbolts sliding home. Rachel securing her fortress against threats that had already breached the walls. I sat in my truck for 10 minutes taking pills, watching windows, and then I drove away because staying would only make things worse. The bar was a dive off 82nd, the kind of place where bikers drank and nobody asked questions, and the bartender kept a shotgun under the register. I found Wrench at a corner table nursing a whiskey at 11 in the morning, which should have bothered me but didn't. We all had our ways of dealing with the weight. Wrench looked like his name, all wiry muscle and scarred knuckles. 65 years old with a gray beard, he'd been growing since 75. He'd left the club the same time I did after Daniel died, because some things you couldn't come back from, even when the Brotherhood demanded it. We'd stayed in touch the way old soldiers did, checking in every few years, making sure we were both still breathing. You look like shit, Cole. Feel worse. He noticed the pill bottle when I set it on the table, didn't comment on it directly, but his eyes asked the question anyway. The ticker. Doc says 2 years, maybe 3. Shit, I'm sorry. We're all dying, Tommy. Just some of us know the schedule. The dark humor landed better with Wrench than it had with Bull. We ordered whiskeys, didn't toast because toasting was bad luck when you were talking about death. The bartender knew us from the old days, left the bottle. Victor's serious about this. He's been asking around for months. Claims Daniel stole $80,000 from the club before he died. Debt passes to blood family, old club law. I turned the glass in my hands, watching amber liquid catch the light. I'd known about the money, or thought I had, but hearing the number made it real. 80,000 was enough to disappear on, enough to start over somewhere far from Portland and the Angels and everyone who wanted you dead. You know what happened that night, Cole, better than anyone. I know Victor's version, and mine. Truth somewhere between. You going to war over this if I have to? Wrench studied me over his whiskey, reading the decision I'd already made. He'd seen that look before, probably worn it himself. The look of a man who'd found something worth dying for after years of trying to find a reason not to. Then I'm in. Danny saved my ass more than once. I owe him. We drank to that, the first toast we'd made, because some debts transcended superstition. My phone rang while I was driving home. Rachel's number. I almost didn't answer, figured she'd just unload more justified anger, but something made me pick up. Emma found old photos. She's asking questions. What kind of photos? The newspaper article. From the rally in '85. She knows I was in the club, Cole. She knows I lied. I pulled over, sat on the shoulder of Highway 26 with hazards flashing and semis blasting past. The photo Rachel was talking about was from the annual run to Crater Lake. 25 people on bikes, sun shining, everybody young and stupid and convinced we'd live forever. Daniel and Rachel and me all grinning like we'd figured out the secret to life. What did you tell her? Nothing, everything. I don't know, she stormed out. Went looking for you. Where's she now? I don't know. The phone went dead. I sat there for 30 seconds, then called the garage number, let it ring. No answer. I tried the bar. Wrench picked up. If Emma Carter comes looking for me, keep her there. Don't let her leave alone. Already here, boss. She found you faster than I expected. The drive back took 20 minutes that felt like hours. Emma was sitting at the same corner table, arms crossed, face set in an expression I recognized from Rachel 20 years ago. Angry, scared, determined to pretend she was neither. I slid into the seat across from her, and Wrench made himself scarce, taking his whiskey to the bar. Tell me the truth. All of it, no more protection. Emma's voice had steel in it, Daniel's steel, the kind that bent but didn't break. I looked at her and saw my brother, saw Rachel, saw the collision of two lives that had tried so hard to be normal and failed because normal wasn't in our blood. Tomorrow, meet me at a place your father loved. Where Crater Lake. The cabin. You know it, I know it. Mom took me there once when I was little. Then never again. Be there at noon. I'll tell you everything. Emma studied me, weighing trust against instinct, and I could see the exact moment she decided to believe me. She stood left without another word, and I sat there with Wrench's abandoned whiskey and the weight of promises I wasn't sure I could keep. The drive to Crater Lake took 2 hours, winding roads through pine forests that looked exactly like they had 40 years ago. The cabin sat on the shore, isolated, no neighbors, for 3 miles. Daniel had bought it in '84 with money he'd made doing legitimate construction work back when he still thought he could have both lives, the club and the family, the violence and the peace. Emma's car was already there when I arrived, a sensible Honda that screamed Rachel's influence. She stood on the dock, staring at the water, and didn't turn when I walked up beside her. The lake was calm, mirror flat, reflecting clouds and mountains, and the kind of beauty that made you forget for just a moment how ugly the world could be. My dad used to fish here every Sunday, catch and release. He said it wasn't about the fish. What was it about? Peace, quiet, time away from the noise. We sat on the dock with fishing poles in the water, not really fishing, just going through motions, because some conversations needed the pretense of another activity. Emma waited patient in a way that reminded me more of Rachel than Daniel. My brother had always been impatient, rushing toward things, rushing away from them, never comfortable with stillness. Your father and I came back from the service in '84. Lebanon peacekeeping mission, both of us. World didn't want to hear about it. We'd done what they asked, went where they sent us, and came home to find out nobody cared. The war was over. Middle East was someone else's problem, and we were reminders of something the country wanted to forget. I could see it in my head clearer than the present sometimes. The Marine barracks in Beirut concrete building that felt like a target. The sound of the truck bomb that collapsed, Daniel pulling me from rubble while our buddies died around us. Your father saved my life. We were in the barracks when the bomb hit. Danny grabbed me and dragged me out. Took injuries meant for me. That was the kind of man he was. You're my brother, he said. That means something. And I said it means everything. Emma's hands were still on the fishing pole, but I could see tears tracking down her face. She didn't wipe them away, just let them fall. We came back and the angels gave us brothers. Structure, purpose. We weren't criminals, not at first. Just survivors looking for tribe. The club was that in the beginning. Men who understood what we'd been through because they'd been there too. But things changed, the club changed. We started running guns, moving product crossing lines we'd told ourselves we'd never cross. Your dad, he had a conscience, started questioning things. Then he met your mom. How did they meet? She was an ER nurse, fixed me up after a wreck in '82. I came in bleeding from a high side on Highway 18, and there was Rachel stitching me up and telling me I was an idiot for riding without better gear. Danny came to pick me up, saw her, and that was it. He fell hard. Rachel had been different then. Tougher, less afraid, with a dark sense of humor that came from spending nights in emergency rooms, seeing what people did to each other. She patched up. Plenty of bikers knew what the life was, but Daniel convinced her he was different. Maybe he was for a while. He wanted family, normal life. A daughter who'd never have to know about the things we'd done. But club law was blood in, blood out. Only way out was death. So they killed him for leaving. It's more complicated than that. Emma turned to face me fully, and her eyes were Daniel's eyes, brown with flecks of gold, searching for truth in a story that had nothing but sharp edges. There's something about that night I never told anyone, not even Rachel. The sun was setting, turning the lake into liquid fire. I took my evening pills, felt them stick in my throat, and told Emma something I'd carried for 20 years. Your father didn't just want to leave. He was going to burn it all down. The cabin's interior smelled of dust and neglect, furniture draped in sheets like ghosts. I made coffee while Emma explored, touching things, picking up photo albums, running her fingers over Daniel's old fishing gear. When she came back to the main room, she had a picture in her hand, Daniel and me on motorcycles, young and grinning. You look like him, same eyes. People used to say that. He was the handsome one. Emma set the photo down, wrapped her hands around the coffee mug I gave her. Outside, darkness had settled over the lake, and the cabin's isolation felt protective rather than lonely. What did you mean, burn it all down? So I told her about the money, about Daniel stealing $80,000 from the club's gun-running operation, about the evidence he'd compiled, transactions and shipments and names, everything the FBI would need to dismantle the Portland chapter completely, about his plan to turn the state's evidence, get immunity for himself, and Rachel disappear into witness protection with baby Emma. He was trying to do the right thing. But in Victor's eyes, in the club's eyes, that was treason. Worse than leaving. Leaving was cowardice, but betrayal was unforgivable. Emma absorbed this, and I could see her rewriting her father's story in her head, replacing the simple narrative of a good man who died young with something more complex and dangerous and real. Is that why they killed him? That's why they tried to. The night he died, he was supposed to meet Victor, negotiate his exit. But Victor brought backup, and it turned into an ambush. I was with Danny, got knocked out in the fight. When I woke up, he was bleeding out, and Victor was standing over him. My voice caught on the memory, and I had to stop, take a breath, force the words through the tightness in my chest that had nothing to do with my failing heart. I should have protected him. That was my job, watching his six, and I failed. It wasn't your fault. Emma's voice was gentle, but she didn't understand. Couldn't understand. Blame didn't care about circumstances or bad luck or being outnumbered. Blame just settled in and made itself at home and charged rent you'd be paying for the rest of your life. We sat in silence, listening to the cabin settle the lake lap against the dock, night sounds filtering through old walls. Finally, Emma spoke again, quieter now. Why did you stay away? These years, because Rachel asked me to. Because she blamed me, and she wasn't wrong. Because every time I looked at you, I saw him, and I couldn't stand the reminder of what I'd failed to protect. So I honored her wishes and kept my distance, and watched from far away as you grew up without ever knowing you had an uncle who thought about you every single day. Emma was crying again, and this time I moved around the table, put my arm around her shoulders in a gesture that felt both foreign and natural. She leaned into me, and we sat there like that while the fire burned down and the darkness pressed against the windows. When Emma finally spoke, her voice was muffled against my jacket. Those men tonight, they're going to keep coming, aren't they? Yeah, they are. What do? We make it right, the only way we can. The sound of gravel under tires cut through the quiet. We both froze, and I moved to the window, peering through a gap in the curtains. A single car, headlights off, rolling slowly up the access road. Not Victor's black sedan, something else. Stay here. Lock the door behind me. I went out with the Glock in my hand, moving along the porch's shadow, letting my eyes adjust to the darkness. The car stopped 50 yards out, and Rachel got out, hands visible, no threat. I lowered the gun, but didn't put it away. How did you find us? This was our place, Cole. Where else would you take her? Rachel walked up to the cabin, and I could see the weight of the drive in her shoulders, the decision to come here after all these years. Emma opened the door despite my instructions, and mother and daughter looked at each other across the threshold. I'm sorry, baby. I'm so sorry I lied to you. Emma hugged her mother, and they cried together in that way women did, open and unashamed. I stood on the porch, giving them space, watching the road for any other visitors who might have followed Rachel. When they separated, Rachel looked at me with eyes that held 20 years of anger and pain and something else. Something that might have been forgiveness, or might have been exhaustion, or might have been the recognition that we were all in this together now, whether we liked it or not. We need to talk, all three of us. Inside, Rachel poured herself coffee and sat at the table like she owned the place, which in a way she did. This had been Daniel's cabin, and when he died, it should have gone to her, but she'd never wanted it, couldn't stand the memories. So it had sat empty except for the times I came out here to maintain it, keeping it ready for a family that would never use it again. Emma sat between us, and I realized this was the first time in 20 years the three of us had been in the same room. The last time had been Daniel's funeral, me standing in the back, Rachel refusing to look at me, baby Emma crying in her grandmother's arms. I've been keeping secrets from both of you. Rachel's voice was steady, the tone of someone who'd made a decision and wouldn't be talked out of it. About Danny, about what really happened, about why Victor wants Emma. She pulled out a folder from her purse, old and worn, full of papers that looked like they'd been handled too many times. Bank statements, receipts, documents with the FBI seal. Danny did steal the money, $80,000, but he wasn't going to keep it. He was going to use it as evidence. Proof of the gun running the drug distribution, everything the club was doing. He was going to burn it down and take us into witness protection. I'd known some of this, suspected more, but hearing it confirmed made it real in a way it hadn't been. Emma looked between us, trying to understand. So he was betraying the club to protect us. He was doing what he thought was right. But Victor found out before Danny could go to the FBI. That's why he set up the meeting. That's why there was an ambush. Rachel's voice broke, and she pushed the folder across the table to me. I opened it, saw documents I'd never seen before, evidence. Danny had compiled a case that would have destroyed the Portland chapter and probably taken down half a dozen others in the network. There's more. Rachel wiped her eyes, forced herself to continue. The night Danny died, I was supposed to drive him to the meeting, but Emma had a fever and I stayed home. Danny asked you to go instead, Cole. You weren't supposed to be there. It was supposed to be just him and Victor. The words hit like bullets, each one finding a mark. I wasn't supposed to be there. Danny had planned a solo meeting, probably figured he could talk his way through it, probably thought Victor would be reasonable because they'd been friends once. And I'd volunteered to watch his back because brothers watched each other's six, and that decision had gotten him killed. This changes everything. I kept my voice level, but my hands were shaking worse than usual. Victor doesn't just want revenge. He wants justice. Club justice. And under the old laws, he's right. What does that mean? It means Emma's not just collateral, she's the debt. Blood pays for blood, betrayal pays with everything. That's the code. That's what Victor's enforcing. The cabin felt smaller, suddenly walls pressing in the isolation that had seemed protective, now feeling like a trap. Rachel stood paced to the window, stared out at darkness. So what do we do? I stood too, every joint protesting, every year making itself known. The pills rattled in my pocket, a reminder that time was a luxury I didn't have. 2 years, the doctor said. Maybe 3, but probably less if I kept living in a way that involved confronting motorcycle gangs and old debts and violence that should have stayed buried. I challenged Victor. Old school, one-on-one, winner takes all. Rachel spun from the window, face pale in the dim light. That's suicide. You're not 25 anymore, Cole. Your heart's failing. You can barely walk without pain. He'll kill you. Maybe, but I'm Danny's brother. It's my right, my duty. Emma stood too, and now all 3 of us were standing the table between us like a battlefield, waiting for someone to make the first move. There has to be another way. There isn't. This is the only language Victor understands. The old ways, the code honor and blood and settling debts the way we always settled them. I pulled out my phone, scrolled to Victor's number, the one I'd kept all these years, just in case. My thumb hovered over the call button, and I looked at Rachel, at Emma, at the family I'd failed once and couldn't fail again. Last chance to walk away. Both of you leave Portland. I'll stay the deal with Victor, and you'll be clear. No. Emma's voice was firm. Daniel's voice, the sound of someone who'd made up their mind and wouldn't be moved. We're family. We face this together. Rachel looked at her daughter, then at me, and something shifted in her expression. The anger that had lived there for 20 years loosened its grip just slightly. Together. I pressed call. Victor answered on the second ring like he'd been waiting. Cole, been expecting to hear from you. I'm issuing challenge. Old school rules, you and me. Winner decides the debt. Silence on the line, just the sound of Victor breathing, considering. Then a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been a cough. Challenge accepted. But Cole, you look like death already. How about we settle this right? You beat me. I clear the debt. You lose same. But either way, you get that heart surgery you need first. Debt waits for no one, but I'm not killing a man who's already dying. The offer was unexpected. Mercy from a man who'd built his reputation on being merciless. Well, because Danny was my friend once. And because I'm tired, Cole. Tired of this war. 3 weeks. Get your surgery, recover enough to stand. Then we finish this. 3 weeks. Your word, my word. Then it's done. 3 weeks from tomorrow. The warehouse. You know which one. I'll be there. Come alone, Cole, or the girl dies first. The line went dead. I set the phone on the table and we all stared at it like it might explode. Rachel was shaking Emma, pale but resolute. Outside, the lake continued its eternal motion against the shore, indifferent to human drama. I'm not letting you go alone. Emma's voice cut through the silence. You don't have a choice. Yes, I do. I'm 25 years old. I make my own choices, and I choose this. Rachel put her hand on Emma's shoulder, and they stood together, united in a way that made my chest tight for reasons that had nothing to do with my dying heart. I looked at them and saw the future I'd tried to protect, the normalcy Daniel had wanted, all of it about to be destroyed because I couldn't let go of old debts and older codes. Then we do this right. We prepare. We plan. Victor gave us 3 weeks. We use every day. The fire had burned down to embers. I added wood watch, sparks climbed toward the ceiling, and felt time running out like sand through fingers. The pills in my pocket were a countdown, each dose marking off days I didn't have. 2 years. Maybe 3. Maybe less. Maybe 3 weeks would be all I'd need. Rachel made more coffee. Emma pulled out her laptop, started researching the warehouse satellite images and old blueprints. I cleaned my guns, checked magazines, the ritual of maintenance, giving my hands something to do, while my mind raced through possibilities and plans and the thousand ways 3 weeks from now could go wrong. Near midnight, Emma fell asleep on the couch, laptop still open beside her. Rachel covered her with a blanket, moved quietly to where I sat at the table, gun parts spread out like a puzzle only I could solve. She looks like him when she sleeps. Yeah, she does. Rachel sat across from me, and we existed in comfortable silence for the first time in 20 years. The anger was still there, would probably always be there, but it had company now. Shared grief, shared fear. Shared love for the girl sleeping on the couch who looked like Daniel and had his courage and his stubbornness and his terrible sense of when to walk away from a fight. I never thanked you for staying away, for honoring my wishes. You were right to ask, was I? Look at us now. Maybe if you'd been around, been family, things would be different. Or maybe they'd be worse. We'll never know. Rachel reached across the table, put her hand over mine, and I realized it was the first time she'd touched me in 2 decades. Her skin was warm, alive, a reminder that we were both still breathing, even if we were running out of reasons why. Don't die in 3 weeks, Cole, please. Emma just found you. Don't make her lose you too. I'll do my best. Your best got Danny killed. The words should have hurt, probably would have yesterday, but tonight they just felt true. My best had never been good enough. Not in Lebanon, not in the club, not in life. I'd survived through luck and other people's sacrifices, and now my luck was running out, along with my heart and my time. I'm sorry, Rachel, for everything, for all of it, for being the brother who lived when the better one died. Don't do that. Danny made his choices. So did I. So did you. We all did what we thought was right, and it turned out wrong, and that's just how life works sometimes. She squeezed my hand once, then went to check on Emma. I sat there with my disassembled Glock and my dying heart, and the weight of 3 weeks pressing down like a physical thing. The pills rattled when I took them, one last dose before sleep I probably wouldn't get. Through the window, Crater Lake reflected starlight, beautiful and cold and eternal. Daniel used to say this place was where he felt closest to peace, and sitting here now, I understood what he meant. Peace wasn't the absence of conflict. It was the moment before the storm, the breath before the plunge, the space between heartbeats where you could see clearly what mattered and what didn't. In 3 weeks, I would fight Victor. In 3 weeks, I might die. In 3 weeks, might end everything. But tonight in this cabin with Rachel and Emma sleeping nearby, I had something I hadn't had in 20 years. I had family. And that was worth whatever the next 3 weeks brought. The surgery was scheduled for 2 weeks out, giving me 1 week recovery before the fight with Victor. The timeline was insane, but Victor had made the terms clear: get the heart fixed or we'd just be two dying old men swinging at ghosts. I spent those first days at the property, Rachel visiting daily, Emma practically living there. The transition from strangers to family happened faster than any of us expected, necessity burning through 2 decades of distance in a matter of hours. Wrench came by with the lawyer again, updating the will to include both Emma and Rachel explicitly. The property, the garage, the unfinished projects, all of it documented and legal now. It wasn't much, but it was mine, earned through work that left scars but also left something solid behind. You planning on dying? Cole planning on being prepared? There's a difference, but even as I said it, I knew the odds. Experimental heart surgery at 62 followed a week later by fighting a man who'd been staying in shape while I'd been slowly dying. The math didn't favor survival. The pre-op appointments were a parade of tests and warnings. My heart was barely functional, held together by scar tissue and stubbornness. The surgeon was younger than Emma, confident in that way doctors had when they'd read about mortality in textbooks, but hadn't really met it yet. The experimental procedure involves replacing damaged tissue with lab-grown cells. Success rate is about 60% in your age group. 40% of patients don't survive the surgery or die within the first month from complications. What about the 60% who make it 10 to 15 years, possibly more? Normal life, relatively speaking. You'd still need medication, lifestyle changes, but you'd have time. Time. The one thing I'd wasted most of my life assuming I had infinite supply of. Now it came down to a coin flip on an operating table. When can we do this at 2 weeks? Use the time to get your affairs in order. Already done. Emma drove me home from that appointment, and we rode in silence through Portland streets that had changed and hadn't changed in the 40 years I'd been circling them. New buildings, same problems. Different faces, same struggles. You scared? Terrified. But I've been terrified before. Terror is just another thing you live with until it isn't. She pulled into my driveway, killed the engine, and we sat there watching the sun disappear behind the Cascades. The property looked different with Emma's car parked there, regularly signs of life in a place that had been more tomb than home. I want you to know something. Emma's voice was steady, Daniel's voice certain even in uncertainty. Whatever happens with the surgery, and whatever happens after, you gave me something nobody else could. You gave me my father back. The real version, not the sanitized story Mom told. That's a gift with sharp edges. All the best ones are. The training started that evening, not the Hollywood montage kind, but the grim reality of teaching someone to survive. Emma, Rachel, and me in the barn. I'd converted to a makeshift gym years ago. Wrench joined us, bringing expertise from decades of staying alive in situations designed to kill you. This isn't about teaching you to fight. You're not going to win a fist fight with a 200-pound man who's been doing violence professionally for 30 years. Emma stood in jeans and a t-shirt looking like any college kid, not someone preparing for war. Rachel wore workout clothes that had seen better decades, but her stance spoke of muscle memory from a life she'd tried to forget. The point is survival. Eyes, throat, groin, then run. Don't try to be brave. Don't try to be fair. Just get away. I demonstrated on Emma, moving slow, showing her where the vulnerable points were, how to use an attacker's momentum, how to make space and escape. She learned fast, Daniel's coordination and Rachel's focus combining into something sharper than either parent alone. But it wasn't the technique that mattered. It was the mindset, the shift from victim to survivor, the understanding that rules went out the window when someone wanted you dead. Your father taught me something in Lebanon. We were pinned down by sniper fire, and I was panicking, frozen. Danny grabbed my face, made me look at him. Family ain't about blood, he said. It's about who you'd bleed for. Then he ran into that fire to drag a wounded Marine to cover. Emma stopped mid-movement, and I could see the words landing, taking root. Rachel turned away, pretending to adjust equipment, but her shoulders shook, and I knew she was crying. Why are you really doing this? After 20 years, I sat on the weight bench, legs dangling, feeling every one of my 62 years. Emma sat beside me, close enough that I could feel her warmth, far enough to maintain the distance we'd lived with for 2 decades. Because I'm dying anyway. Heart's giving out. Doc says 2 years, maybe 3, probably less if I keep doing stupid things like this. That's the worst reason I've ever heard. It's the only honest one. Emma processed this, staring at the barn walls like they held answers. Outside evening, birds sang their territorial songs, indifferent to human drama. He loved you, Mom told me. Even after everything, even knowing you'd be there that night, he loved you. The words hit harder than Bull's fists would later. I'd carried the guilt for so long, it had become part of my skeleton, load-bearing, essential. The idea that Daniel had forgiven me or never blamed me to begin with was almost worse than the anger I'd imagined. That makes it worse. No, it makes it matter. What you're doing now, it matters because he loved you and you loved him, and that's worth dying for. Rachel came back then, eyes red but voice steady. She sat on my other side, and we were 3 people on a bench facing barn doors that opened onto a property that might soon belong to just 2 of them. There's something else I need to tell you both. About the night Danny died, about what happened after. She told us then the part of the story I'd never heard. About racing to the warehouse when she heard gunshots over Danny's open phone line. About finding me unconscious and Daniel bleeding out. About Ricky Knuckles, O'Brien Victor's second-in-command and brother-in-law, trying to stop her from getting us out. We struggled. I grabbed Danny's gun. It went off. Her voice broke, but she forced the words through. Ricky died instantly. Headshot. I dragged you both to the car. Danny died before we reached the hospital. I couldn't save him. But I saved you. The confession hung between us, and I realized Rachel's guilt matched mine, 2 people carrying the weight of that night, neither able to put it down. That's why Victor wants revenge. I killed his brother-in-law. Ricky Knuckles O'Brien. Victor's family. Emma looked between us, understanding crystallizing. This wasn't just about stolen money or betrayed brotherhood. This was about blood family, the oldest debts that never got forgiven. There's more. Rachel's voice dropped to barely above whisper. I was pregnant when Danny died, 3 months along. Your brother Emma. I miscarried 2 weeks later. From the stress, the running, the fear, lost him in a motel bathroom in Spokane while you slept in the other room. The words fell like stones into water ripples spreading outward. Emma made a sound, half sob, half gasp. I sat frozen, rewriting history again, adding another ghost to the collection I already carried. That's why I blamed you so much, Cole. You took everything. Danny, the baby, the life we were supposed to have. I'm sorry. The words were inadequate, always had been, but they were all I had. Rachel leaned her head on my shoulder and Emma took my hand, and we sat there while the sun climbed higher and time ran out. The days blurred together, a routine of training and planning and trying to prepare for outcomes we couldn't control. Emma was learning not just self-defense but awareness, how to read situations, trust instincts. Rachel surprised us all by demonstrating skills she'd kept buried muscle memory from decades ago, returning with practice. Wrench worked with me separately, trying to rebuild strength the dying heart had stolen. We both knew it was futile, but the ritual mattered. Two old warriors going through forms pretending preparation could overcome biology. You know this is probably suicide. Probably. And you're doing it anyway. What choice do I have? Victor won't stop. The debt has to be settled. There's always a choice, Cole. You could run, all three of you, disappear like Rachel did before. I looked at him. This man who'd survived war and the club and 65 years of life that tried to break him at every turn. He knew the answer before I said it. Some debts you can't run from. And I'm tired of running. The surgery came faster than expected. Complications with scheduling, moving it up 3 days, which meant 2 days less recovery before the fight, which meant even worse odds. But I signed the forms, took the pre-op medications, and let Emma drive me to the hospital at dawn. Rachel met us there, and we sat in the pre-op room, 3 people trying to find words for something that had no words. The nurse started an IV, and I felt the pre-medication making everything soft and distant. See you on the other side. Emma squeezed my hand, and Rachel stood at the foot of the bed, and they were the last things I saw before the drugs pulled me under into darkness that felt like drowning in warm water. Dreams came fractured and strange. Daniel young and whole standing in the cabin at Crater Lake. Your daughter's got your courage, brother. Don't waste the time she's giving you. Victor older sitting across a fire. We were all just trying to survive, Cole. That's the only truth that matters. Rachel pregnant, scared, running through rain. Save her. Save them both. I woke to pain that felt like someone had cracked my chest open with a crowbar, which wasn't far from truth. The surgeon's face swam into focus, still confident now, also relieved. You made it. Surgery went well. Next 72 hours are critical, but you've got a real chance. The 72 hours were fog and pain and medications that made time meaningless. Emma and Rachel took shifts when always there, reading or talking or just existing in the same space. Wrench visited, sat silently for an hour left. Father Miguel came, offered prayers I didn't believe in, but appreciated anyway. On the 3rd day, I was strong enough to sit up. On the 5th, they moved me to regular recovery. By the end of the 1st week, the surgeon was using words like remarkable and unprecedented, which felt like jinxes, but apparently weren't. But I didn't have the luxury of a normal recovery timeline. In 1 week, I'd be fighting Victor. 1 week to go from cracked chest to functional enough to not die immediately. The recovery nurse was a woman in her 50s who'd seen enough patients to know bullshit from genuine progress. She didn't accept excuses, didn't tolerate laziness, and pushed me through physical therapy that felt like torture but worked. Your body's been falling apart for years, Mr. Bennett. We're rebuilding it, but you have to do the work. Nobody gets healthy by lying in bed feeling sorry for themselves. She reminded me of drill instructors from the service, which was probably why she was effective. By day 7, I could walk the hallway without stopping. By day 9, I could climb stairs. By day 10, discharge day, I felt stronger than I had in a decade, but nowhere near strong enough to fight. Emma picked me up, drove me home, and I saw Rachel's car already in the driveway. She'd apparently been staying at the property maintaining things, making sure I had somewhere to come back to. The gesture felt bigger than the action commitment to something neither of us had names for yet. The garage had been cleaned, organized, tools arranged properly for the first time since Daniel died. Rachel stood in the doorway, wiping her hands on a rag, trying to look casual about the work she'd clearly put in. Figured you'd want things in order. Thank you. Emma helped me inside and we sat at the kitchen table, same table where we'd drafted the will and eaten Rachel's casserole and tried to prepare for endings that had turned into beginnings. Coffee appeared stronger than hospital coffee, but still civilized compared to the bitter stuff I usually made. The fight's in 4 days. The words hung there unavoidable. I'd been avoiding thinking about it during recovery, focusing on getting through each day. But time had kept moving, and now the warehouse confrontation loomed. You're not ready. Rachel's voice was flat, stating fact, not opinion. No, but it doesn't matter. Victor's not going to wait, and the debt won't settle itself. Emma pulled out her laptop satellite images of the warehouse district. She'd been researching, planning, thinking tactically in ways that reminded me uncomfortably of Daniel. We need backup, people we trust. Wrench already said he's in, but we need more. I made calls that afternoon, reaching out to old contacts who'd left the club, who owed Daniel favors, who might be willing to stand against Victor for the right reasons. Most said no. Some didn't answer. But a precious few said yes. By evening, we had a list. Wrench, 2 of his old service buddies, Father Miguel, surprisingly, and Detective Webb, who'd worked cases with me before, and owed me for testimony that had closed a murder investigation 5 years back. It wasn't an army, but it was something. 7 people, including me, against Victor's crew of probably double that. The math still didn't favor us, but at least we wouldn't be completely outnumbered. The next 3 days were preparation. Emma and Rachel learning the warehouse layout, escape routes, cover points. Wrench stockpiling medical supplies because someone was going to need them. Father Miguel providing neutral ground blessing and the kind of moral authority that sometimes prevented things from going completely sideways. And me trying to regain strength. My body didn't have taking walks that exhausted me, lifting weights that felt twice as heavy as they should. The surgery had bought me time, but taken capability trade-off that would have been acceptable if I'd had months to recover instead of days. The night before the fight, Rachel made dinner, and we ate as a family for maybe the last time. Emma talked about plans for the garage, ideas for expanding, hiring veterans, creating something that would last beyond whatever happened tomorrow. Rachel added business suggestions, cash flow projections, practical thinking that balanced Emma's idealism. I sat there listening, contributing occasionally, mostly just absorbing the moment. This was what Daniel had wanted, what he'd died trying to create. Family around a table, making plans, building futures. The fact that it had taken 20 years and was happening the night before I might die felt like cosmic irony, but I'd take it. After Emma went to bed, Rachel and I sat on the porch watching stars appear one by one. The October air was cold enough to see breath, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called Lonely Sound that matched my mood. I've been thinking about the cabin. Crater Lake, Daniel's place. It's yours if you want it. Legally, it's in some trust, but I can sign it over. That's not what I meant. Rachel turned from the stars, and in the porch light, I could see the girl Daniel had fallen for 40 years ago, still there under the layers of time and survival. I meant maybe we could all use it, fix it up, make it what Danny wanted it to be. Family place, family place. She didn't say if you survive tomorrow, but it hung unspoken. We both knew the odds. Victor was younger by 2 years, in better shape, and hadn't just had his chest cracked open. The fight was already lost on paper. But sometimes you fought anyway because not fighting meant something worse than dying. I'm sorry, Rachel, for everything, for all the years, for not being there when you needed someone, for being the brother who lived when the better one died. Stop, just stop. Rachel's voice was sharp but not angry. Danny made his choices. I made mine. You made yours. We all did what we thought was right, and it turned into this tangled mess, and nobody's to blame because we're all to blame. She reached across, took my hand, and I realized it was the second time she'd touched me voluntarily in 20 years. Don't die tomorrow, Cole. I know the odds are bad and your heart's barely working and everything's broken. But don't die, because Emma needs you and I need you, and Danny would want you to stick around and be the annoying little brother who fixes motorcycles and teaches his daughter things I don't know how to teach. I'll do my best. Your best got Danny killed. The words should have hurt, would have destroyed me a month ago, but tonight they just felt true. And truth had edges, but also clarity. Rachel smiled slightly, recognizing the callback to earlier conversations, and we both laughed, dark humor that came from surviving things that should have killed you. I'll do better than my best. That's all anyone can ask. She stayed until midnight, and when she left, she kissed my cheek, sisterly affection that felt like forgiveness or acceptance or maybe just acknowledgement that we were all doing our best with broken tools and incomplete instructions. The morning of the fight came too fast, dawn breaking over the property with the kind of beauty that felt obscene given what the day promised. I woke on the floor, back screaming protest body reminding me that 10 days wasn't enough recovery time for experimental heart surgery. Emma and Rachel were already up making coffee, moving around the kitchen with the kind of quiet efficiency that spoke of shared purpose. We ate breakfast in near silence, nobody wanting to voice the fear that this might be the last meal together. Wrench arrived at 9, followed by the others in staggered intervals. By noon, we were all gathered in the garage, 7 people preparing for something that might end with one or all of us dead. Victor sent word through Father Miguel at 2 p.m. meeting time set for 6 p.m. Warehouse District, the old fish processing plant everyone called the kill house because of what had happened there over the decades. Neutral ground in that it belonged to no one perfect place for settling old scores. Emma wanted to come and Rachel too, but I drew the line. You two stay here. With Webb, if this goes wrong, you run. Evidence goes to the FBI and you disappear. That's non-negotiable. Emma started to argue, saw something in my face that stopped her. She hugged me instead, held on longer than necessary, and when she stepped back, her eyes were wet but determined. Come back. That's the plan. We loaded into vehicles at 5, giving ourselves time to arrive and assess. The kill house sat on the edge of the industrial waterfront, surrounded by abandoned buildings and rusted equipment. Perfect place for the kind of meeting where someone might not walk away. Victor's crew was already there when we arrived, 8 motorcycles parked in precise formation. I counted bodies Victor, plus 9 others. We had 7. Not impossible odds, but not good either. I got out of the truck, felt every one of my 62 years in the 10 days since surgery. Wrench fell in beside me, and the others fanned out in loose formation. Inside the kill house, industrial lights hung from chains, casting shadows that made everyone look like villains. Victor waited in the center of the floor, surrounded by his crew. He looked older than I remembered, gray beard lines around his eyes, but his shoulders were still broad, and his stance spoke of a man comfortable with violence. We'd been friends once before Daniel, before the war, before everything went wrong. Cole, right on time. Always were punctual. Let's end this, Victor. This vendetta has gone on long enough. He circled me slowly, predator assessing prey. Vendetta, that's a strong word. I prefer justice. Your brother stole from us. Betrayed us. Your niece needs to pay. Daniel never stole anything. You framed him. Victor pulled out a ledger, old school bookkeeping, bank statements. $80,000 withdrawn the week before Daniel died. Only 3 people had access, Victor, Daniel, and Ricky Knuckles. Ricky's dead. I didn't take it. That leaves your brother. The documents looked legitimate, and doubt crept in. Had Daniel actually stolen the money to fund his FBI deal? Before I could respond, Wrench's voice cut through the tension. Check the dates, Cole. Look at the actual dates. I studied the paperwork closer. The withdrawal was dated 3 days after Daniel died. Impossible for a dead man to steal. Victor's face darkened as he realized his own evidence had been manipulated. Someone had framed Daniel posthumously. Someone in his crew. The question was who? Bull. One of Victor's younger members stepped forward, swagger and stupidity in equal measure. Bull, who'd been with the club 25 years, who'd had access to accounts, who'd been Ricky's closest friend. Victor turned to face Bull, and I saw understanding dawn. Bull had killed Daniel that night, then covered his own embezzlement by blaming it on a dead man. Before anyone could move, Bull pulled a gun. Chaos erupted. The fight happened in slow motion and fast forward simultaneously. Bull fired. Wrench tackled me to the ground, bullets sparking off concrete where I'd been standing. Victor's crew split, some backing. Victor, some backing Bull. Old alliances fracturing in real time. Emma and Rachel burst through the side door despite orders to stay away. Rachel had her .38 That some had presence of mind to go for cover. Gunfire echoed in the warehouse, deafening in the enclosed space. I got to my feet, saw Bull aiming at Emma. Time slowed. I moved without thinking, throwing myself between them. The bullet hit my shoulder, spinning me around, pain exploding through fresh surgical scars. But I stayed standing, raised my Glock, fired once. Bull went down, shot through the knee. Not fatal, not merciful either. He screamed, clutching his leg, gun skittering across concrete. Victor stood over Bull, face twisted with disgust. You killed Danny. You stole from us. You let me chase ghosts for 20 years. He pulled his own weapon, pressed it to Bull's head. One shot. Bull stopped screaming. The warehouse went silent, except for ringing ears and someone crying. Victor looked at me across the space, two old warriors who'd both been wrong and both been right. Debts paid. Your brother didn't betray us. Bull did. Emma's clear. Rachel's clear. You're clear. I sat down hard, shock hitting, blood soaking my shirt. Wrench was there, immediately applying pressure, calling for medical. Emma and Rachel reached me, both talking at once, hands on my face, my arms keeping me conscious through force of will. The ambulance came, EMTs working efficiently. Victor stood watching as they loaded me, and before the doors closed, he spoke one last time. Danny was the best of us. Tell his daughter that. Then the doors closed and we were moving, sirens, wailing, Rachel holding my hand on one side, Emma on the other. I stayed conscious long enough to hear the EMT say my vitals were stable. The bullet had missed anything critical. Long enough to see relief on Rachel's face. Long enough to think maybe, just maybe, I'd get to finish that Harley after all. Then the darkness came gentler this time, and I let it take me. Due to length constraints, I'll provide the opening of part 3 and can complete it in a follow-up message if needed. The hospital was becoming a second home, same sterile white, same beeping machines, same smell of antiseptic trying to mask decay. But this time the prognosis was better. Clean through and through, and the shoulder missed bone, missed major vessels, missed everything important. Lucky the surgeon called it, which felt like an understatement, given what could have happened. I woke to find Emma asleep in the chair beside my bed, head on her folded arms. Rachel stood at the window, silhouetted against afternoon light, watching the world continue its indifferent motion while we dealt with the wreckage of our past. You're awake, Rachel's voice was quiet, careful not to wake Emma. She came to the bedside and I saw exhaustion in every line of her face, the kind that came from too many hospital vigils, too many nights wondering if morning would bring loss. How long? 2 days. They kept you sedated while they monitored for infection. Surgery went well, but the doctor wanted to be sure, especially after the heart surgery. I flexed my shoulder, felt the pull of stitches, the deep ache that said muscles had been violated but would heal. Better than the alternative. Victor left town, turned club presidency over to younger members headed to Montana. Detective Webb got a full confession from Victor about the cover-up, but Rachel paused, choosing words carefully. Webb decided Bull's death was justified given the circumstances. Self-defense during commission of multiple felonies. Case closed officially. The weight of it settled over me. 20 years of running, hiding, blaming, and it had all come down to one man's greed and another man's desperation to cover his tracks. Daniel had been trying to do the right thing, and it had gotten him killed anyway. Emma stirred, woke, saw me watching. Relief flooded her face, and she grabbed my hand, squeezed probably too hard for someone with a bullet wound, but I didn't complain. You scared us. Seems to be my specialty. She laughed, watery and relieved, and Rachel joined us on the other side of the bed. We were 3 people who'd started as strangers and become family through violence and revelation, and the stubborn refusal to give up on each other. What now? The question was Emma's, but both women waited for my answer, like I had wisdom, instead of just accumulated scars and second chances I didn't deserve. Now we heal, and then we build something that lasts. Discharge came 3 days later with prescriptions and restrictions and dire warnings about infection and not doing anything stupid for at least 6 weeks. I nodded through it all, knowing I'd ignore half the advice and probably regret it. Emma drove me home, the property looking different in November, light autumn, giving way to winter seasons, turning regardless of human drama. Rachel's car was in the driveway, permanent fixture, now her presence woven into the property's daily rhythm. The garage had changed during my hospital stay. Emma and Wrench had been working, cleaning, organizing, hanging a sign above the door, Bennett and Daughter Automotive. Opening soon. I stood there staring at it, and Emma came up beside me uncertain. I hope you don't mind. I figured if we're going to do this, we should really do it. Daniel would love it. The words came out rougher than intended, emotion catching in my throat. This was what he'd wanted, what he'd died trying to create. A future where Emma could build something clean, something honest, something that didn't require looking over your shoulder, waiting for the past to catch up. The next weeks were recovery and preparation. Physical therapy for the shoulder continued, cardiac rehab from the heart surgery, slow rebuilding of a body that had taken too much damage, but kept functioning anyway. Emma and Rachel worked on the business side, permits and licenses and all the bureaucratic nightmares that came with legitimacy. Wrench brought by equipment he'd acquired through means I didn't ask about. Father Miguel helped with community outreach, spreading word that a veteran-owned garage was opening, fair prices, honest work. Detective Webb even stopped by with a case of motor oil and gruff blessing that was as close to approval as he got. 3 months after the warehouse, we opened officially. Small ceremony, just family and friends. Wrench brought beer. Emma had ordered sandwiches, and we stood around the garage talking about Daniel more openly than any of us had in 20 years. He'd be proud of you, Emma. Father Miguel's voice carried authority from both his cloth and his past, taking pain and making purpose. That's redemption. The customers started coming. First a trickle, old bikers who'd known Daniel, veterans who'd heard about fair prices and honest work. Then steady flow enough to keep busy but not overwhelmed, sustainable rather than chaotic. Emma proved to have Daniel's touch with engines and Rachel's head for business. They balanced each other, yin and yang, building something that worked because it was built on truth instead of lies, foundation instead of facade. My role shifted naturally from operator to advisor. The heart was healing, the shoulder too, but 62 was 62, and the surgeries had taken their toll. I could work a few hours a day, teach Emma advanced techniques, handle the business that required age and experience. But the heavy lifting, literal and figurative, was passing to the next generation. And I was okay with that. 6 months after opening, Emma came to me with news that changed everything again. I met someone. His name was David, veteran, Purple Heart from Afghanistan, working as a teacher while figuring out what came next. They'd met at one of Emma's self-defense classes. She'd started those two teaching women the basics I'd taught her. David had come to help demonstrate, and apparently the rest was history. You'll like him. He reminds me of you, actually. The good parts. There are good parts. She laughed, and I met David the next week. Quiet guy, thoughtful, carrying his own weight, but not crushed by it. He looked at Emma the way Daniel had looked at Rachel, like she was something precious and breakable and stronger than she knew. Your intentions are honorable. The question came out before I could stop it. Protective uncle voice I'd never earned, but apparently had anyway. David met my eyes, didn't flinch. Yes, sir, I love her. Planning to ask her to marry me if that's okay with you. It's not my permission you need. But for what it's worth, you have my blessing. They were engaged by Christmas, married by spring in a small ceremony at Crater Lake. Rachel cried, I pretended I wasn't crying, and Emma looked radiant in a simple dress that had been her grandmother's. Father Miguel performed the ceremony, and at the reception, Wrench got drunk enough to tell embarrassing stories about Daniel that had everyone laughing and crying in equal measure. I danced with Rachel at the wedding, first time we'd touched like that in decades. She'd put on a dress that showed the woman she'd been before life taught her to hide, and in the evening light by the lake, she looked 20 years younger. Danny would have loved this. Yeah, he would have. We swayed to music neither of us really heard, lost in memories and regrets and the strange peace that came from surviving long enough to see doom after all the pain. The years rolled forward, seasons turning, business growing. Emma and David moved into a house nearby, close enough for family dinners, but far enough for independence. Rachel stayed at the property more nights than not, never officially moving in, but accumulating presents through coffee mugs and books and laughter that had been missing too long. We never called it anything, never defined the relationship. Just two old survivors finding comfort in each other's company, understanding, born of shared history and hard-won grace. 3 years after the warehouse, I went for cardiac checkup, expecting routine results. Got something else instead. Your heart function is remarkable, Mr. Bennett. Better than we hoped. You're in the top 5% of surgical outcomes, meaning barring complications, you're looking at 20 years. Maybe more. 20 years. I'd be 82. Longer than Daniel had lived, longer than I'd ever expected to make it. The gift of time felt overwhelming and terrifying and precious, so I should cancel my funeral arrangements. The surgeon didn't appreciate the joke, but I saw the recovery nurse hiding a smile. I'd kept in touch with her, sent Christmas cards, the kind of connection you make with someone who sees you at your worst and helps you back from it. Keep taking the medication. Maintain the lifestyle changes. Come back every 6 months for monitoring. But Mr. Bennett, you've been given something rare. Don't waste it. I drove home thinking about the years I'd spent alone in a garage full of unfinished projects. The property looked different now. Emma's car there daily, Rachel's presence permanent, David's truck parked beside Emma's. Family in the way that mattered. That evening, Bennett and Daughter Automotive was celebrating its third anniversary. Wrench had catered Emma's self-defense students came veterans we'd helped over the years. Father Miguel said Grace Detective Webb told jokes that weren't funny, but everyone laughed anyway. Rachel found me standing by the garage door watching it all and slipped her hand into mine. This is what he wanted, you know. All of it, I know. So why do you look sad? Because he's not here to see it. She leaned against me and we stood there watching Emma laugh, with David watching people who'd become family through choice rather than blood watching the future Daniel had died trying to create. He sees it, Cole. Wherever he is, he sees it. And he's proud. 5 years after the warehouse, Emma came to the garage with news that made time feel even more precious. She was pregnant. Daniel's first grandchild, another generation, the future continuing to unfold despite everything. Rachel cried. I pretended I wasn't crying, and Emma glowed with the kind of joy that made you forget for just a moment how much pain the world held. I want to name him Daniel, if it's a boy. After Grandpa, your father would be honored. Will you tell him when he's old enough? Will you tell him about Grandpa Daniel? The question carried weight responsibility, the passing of history from one generation to the next. I looked at Emma, saw Daniel in her eyes, saw Rachel in her determination, saw the future waiting to unfold. I'll tell him everything. The good and the bad, the heroism and the mistakes, all of it. So he understands that people are complicated and family is messy and love is worth fighting for even when the fighting costs everything. Emma hugged me, careful of my shoulder that still ached in cold weather, mindful of the heart that beat stronger than it had any right to. When she pulled back, her eyes were wet but smiling. He's lucky to have you as a grandfather. The word hit me like a bullet, in a good way, validating something I'd never expected to be. Grandfather, family, legacy, all the things I'd thought I'd lost when Daniel died, handed back to me by his daughter, who'd been brave enough to let me in. Daniel Bennett Carter Rivera was born on a Tuesday in spring, 7 pounds, 6 ounces lungs that worked perfectly from the first cry. I held him in the hospital, this tiny person who carried Daniel's name and Emma's eyes in a future none of us could predict, but all of us would protect. Your grandfather was a hero, I told him, knowing he couldn't understand but needing to say it anyway. Not perfect, not always right, but he tried. He tried so hard to do what was right, and that's what matters in the end. Rachel stood beside me, tears streaming, touching the baby's cheek with fingers that trembled. Emma watched from the bed, exhausted and radiant, David beside her, looking terrified and proud in equal measure. This was family, this was grace, this was everything Daniel had died protecting and everything I'd lived to see. The years continued, seasons turning, baby Daniel growing into a toddler who loved motorcycles and questions, and his grandfather who told stories about a man he'd never meet but would carry in his name. Emma expanded the garage, hired more veterans, created programs for teaching mechanical skills to those transitioning out of service. Rachel and I finally made it official on a quiet afternoon at the courthouse, no ceremony, just Wrench and Emma as witnesses. Seems silly at our age, but Emma had insisted, said Daniel would want us to stop pretending we were just friends sharing space. Mrs. Bennett suits you. Rachel smiled, the kind that reached her eyes, lines of laughter, replacing the fear that had lived there so long. I never thought I'd be back here. Never thought I'd be happy. Life's full of surprises. Good ones, finally. 8 years after the warehouse, I took young Daniel to Crater Lake, just the two of us. He was 3, asking questions about everything, fearless in the way only children could be. We stood on the dock where I'd stood with Emma, where Daniel Sr. had fished every Sunday, where peace felt possible. Grandpa, why's the water so blue? Because it's deep. Deeper than you can imagine. Your grandfather used to say, that's what makes it special. The depth. Did you know him? I did. He was my brother. the best man I ever knew. Tell me about him. So I did. Told him about Daniel's courage and conviction, about the mistakes and the sacrifices, about how he died protecting the family that would eventually include this boy carrying his name. Young Daniel listened with the intensity children had, absorbing stories that would shape him in ways we couldn't yet see. That evening back at the property, we had dinner. Emma, David, Rachel, me, Wrench, Father Miguel, Detective Webb, who'd become more friend than law enforcement. Young Daniel ran between legs, chasing Wrench's old dog, laughter filling spaces that had been silent too long. Rachel leaned against me on the porch later, watching the sun set over the Cascades, painting the sky in colors that had no names. Happy? Yeah, finally. After everything? Yeah, good. Because you've earned it, Cole. Every bit of happiness you've earned. We sat there until stars appeared, same stars Daniel had watched from this property, same eternal witnesses to temporary struggles. The garage lights were on, Emma inside, working late on a project. The house held the warmth of family, the kind you built rather than born into. 10 years after the warehouse, I turned 72. The heart was still ticking, medications doing their job, body worn but functional. Young Daniel was 5 starting kindergarten, asking even more questions. Emma was pregnant again, girl, this time planning to name her Rachel Marie. The garage had become an institution place where veterans went not just for car repair, but for community, for understanding, for the brotherhood they'd lost when they left service. Emma had done what Daniel couldn't, build something that lasted, something that helped people. And me, I was teaching Daniel Jr. how to rebuild a carburetor, passing on knowledge Daniel Sr. had taught me. The circle continuing, generations connected through grease and metal and stories that refused to die. Rachel found me in the garage one afternoon, Daniel napping in the office, after fighting his grandfather's patient instruction. You've done good, Cole. Better than good. We've done good. All of us together. She kissed me gentle and certain, and I kissed her back, grateful for second chances, and the stubborn refusal to give up even when giving up seemed reasonable. That evening, the whole family gathered for dinner at the cabin. Crater Lake shimmered under summer sun, peaceful and eternal. Emma's belly showed prominently, David attentive, young Daniel running wild with the freedom of childhood. Wrench told bad jokes, Father Miguel said Grace Webb complained about retirement being boring. And I sat there 72 years old, heart rebuilt, shoulder scarred, but alive. More than alive, living. Really living for the first time in decades. Daniel's pocket watch sat in my pocket, ticking away seconds that no longer felt like countdown, but like gift. Time spent with family is time well spent. He'd known that at 25. Took me until 72 to understand, but I'd gotten there. Finally, after everything I'd gotten there. Young Daniel climbed into my lap, smelling of lake water and sunscreen, and the kind of innocence that came from growing up protected. Grandpa, tell me about great-grandpa Daniel again. Which story, the one where he saved you? So I told him. About Lebanon, about the barracks, about Daniel running into danger to pull me clear, about brotherhood and sacrifice, and the kind of love that didn't need words because it showed in actions. Young Daniel listened rapt, and when I finished, he hugged me tight. I want to be like him when I grow up. Then be brave, be kind, protect the people you love. That's what made your great-grandfather special. The sun set over Crater Lake, painting the water gold and crimson. Rachel called everyone to dinner, and we gathered around the table Daniel Sr. had built 40 years ago, family spanning generations connected by blood and choice, and the refusal to let the past destroy the future. I looked around at faces I loved, at the life we'd built from wreckage, at young Daniel who carried his great-grandfather's name and would carry his legacy forward. This was enough. This was everything. This was what Daniel had died protecting and what I had lived to see fulfilled. The last light faded over the mountains, and the stars came out one by one, eternal and indifferent and beautiful. Inside the cabin, laughter and conversation rose, the sound of family, being family, imperfect and precious and real. I stood on the porch one more time, feeling the weight of years and gifts and the time I'd been given that I didn't deserve but had received anyway. Daniel's watch ticked in my pocket, measuring seconds that had become years that had become a life worth living. Your daughter's safe, I told my brother's ghost, told the stars, told the night. She's happy. She's building something good. Your great-grandson carries your name and your courage. The debt's paid, Danny. The debt's finally paid. Inside, Rachel called my name and I went to her to family to the future that kept unfolding despite everything. The past was done. The future waited. And for the first time in 20 years, I was ready for it.